Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Lawton. This is Inside Scoop Virginia, and we have tonight Patrick Hope with us. He is a delegate from the 47th District, which is Arlington. I don't know if you have other parts of
just
Arlington. Oh my gosh, that's an actual unusual situation. Usually it's parts of this, parts of that. But what Patrick is here to talk about, and I will say Patrick is another candidate for the 8th Congressional District seat as well, but what Patrick is actually here to talk about tonight is an area of his expertise, which is health law. Patrick is an attorney. He graduated from the Columbus School of Law, if I've got that right.
Correct, yeah.
And he has been in the General Assembly since, I believe, 2010.
That's right.
So, and he is one of those folks where anytime a health-related issue comes up, people say you need to go talk to Patrick Hope. So he's going to kick off our show on mental health to help us understand what the process is. We've all read about it, either back in 2007 with Virginia Tech, or unfortunately more recently in November, when Creedy's son attacked Senator Deeds and then killed himself. And in a lot of those news articles, there were phrases like emergency custody orders and temporary detention orders. And we're going to have Patrick explain those to us, and then we're going to talk about the legislation. So I really appreciate you taking time to come and talk. So first, explain what this emergency custody order, temporary detention order thing is.
Okay, because it's very complex and very confusing.
Okay.
When someone is picked up by the police for some crisis, the sheriff or the police take them to be evaluated by the community services boards. And the community services board are people that are made up of psychiatrists that oversee the policies and procedures for people with mental illness.
Okay.
And they will decide if that individual at that time is a danger to themselves or others. If they are, they enter into what they call an ECO, an emergency custody order. At that point, they decide if that person does fit the description of being a danger to self or others. They put them into a temporary detention order. And that's the process where they look for someone to find a bed to put them. And right now, the current law says that you have 4 hours to find a bed if that person is eligible. 4 hours. You can add another 2 hours to it, so it's 6 hours total. And we think what happened in the Senator Deeds case with Gus, the tragedy there, is that they exhausted those 6 hours. And by law, they were forced to let him go because they could not find a bed. And so that's when the tragedy occurred, when Gus went home and disaster struck, a tragedy struck. And this does happen, we know, frequently in Virginia. It doesn't happen on a daily basis, but it does happen frequently. It rarely ends up in the tragedy that we saw back in November, December it was.
Right.
But that's a situation that we have in place.
So do these emergency custody orders only come up if the police get involved? Can a private citizen say, I think this, my husband, my wife is having issues, and go and get one? Or
That's right. You go in and you get evaluated by a therapist, and if they decide that you fit the description of being a danger to self or others, then they go ahead and start the process to find a bed. And executing it is where the issues are, and finding a bed. And typically, beds across the country are very hard to come by. And what the person from the Community Services Board will do is they will call around to private hospitals, and if there's no bed located in the region there, they will try state hospitals. But since we've been downsizing, closing institutions since the 90s, we've really struggled to find beds. And so it's not uncommon for a community services board to call somewhere here in Northern Virginia. They would call somewhere south of Richmond just to find bed availability. And that takes a lot of time to go through that process to find out where the bed isn't eligible to find a bed. And once you do that, you have to hold them for 48 hours. And at that point, that's when you come back to stand before a judge to find out whether there needs to be a commitment hearing.
All right, so at the end of this process is the commitment hearing itself, which I've heard are just retching for people who have to go through them, particularly folks who are trying to get help for family members, because it's somewhat adversarial. People are on both sides. Somebody gets appointed, I think, to represent the person you're trying to commit, and it can get
It's an involuntary commitment, and so you're not involuntary means you're not doing it willingly. So you're being forced to do this. But if the court finds, after speaking to experts, that you fit that description, then you could be sent to some facility where for up to 30 days that you could be sitting in a bed getting treatment, forced treatment.
Now, how difficult is it to get one of these detention orders or to get somebody committed? Because my understanding had always been that some part of that process was supposed to have been loosened up after Virginia Tech to try and avoid some of these problems, but it didn't particularly work, or is it really a bed issue?
Well, it is a bed issue, and I think with Senator Deed's son case, it was a bed shortage issue, and we don't know the full details of the investigation. We should know that soon, but we think what happened in that case was that they went through the 6 hours, couldn't find a bed, and they were forced by law to release, and they had to go. And that's what the focus of our legislation is right now. That's what we're focused on really intently in this session. And with the budget that just came out this week, there's over $40 million, nearly $50 million in for new mental health services.
Well, how long is that going to last? Because I remember a similar figure was put into the budget after Virginia Tech, and then with the ensuing recession that came up and other priorities intervened, is the fact that it happened to a senator that everybody knows going to be enough to keep that money actually available? Well,
and that's what we are at the legislature. We want to be very cautious to make sure that we do keep that money in there. And you're absolutely right. We are now, current law, we are below Virginia Tech level. We put in about $45 million right after that tragedy at Virginia Tech, and we are now below those levels. So it's clearly something that we got to keep our eye on the radar. The recession was what defunded it. We need to make sure that we not only build on the mental health reforms that we're putting in place this year, but we expand on them. I believe that this is just the first step. There more needs to be done.
Well, let's talk about what you're trying to get done, because there were a couple of different components of the bills, and the House bills have now gone over to the Senate, and then Senator Deed's bill, which seemed to have just sucked up everybody else's bill, came over and is in the committee. You're on that mental health subcommittee for Courts of Justice. So what's the whole status of this? What are these bills going to do? Are we going to get these little piecemeal House bills? Do you think it's going to be Senator Deed's bill? What's your guess?
That's a great question. I mean, there's really three components, and we mostly agree, but there's one major difference between the two bills. The first thing we agree on, the House and the Senate, is we agree on putting in a real-time registry so that when folks from the Community Services Board are looking for beds, they will see all the hospitals, both private and the public facility, mental health institutions, how many beds that they have available. So they're not wasting time calling, looking for beds. So they know exactly where they are. It'll be real-time registry. So we agree on that. Second thing we agree on is that once you get close to the end of the emergency custody order, the timing to that, then the public health facility will be the bed of last resort. So we'll make sure that will be the safety net, that if there's no place available in the private hospitals where you call first, the state facility will be the bed of last resort.
Well, what kind of state facilities do we have anymore?
Well, we have about 5 or 6. In Northern Virginia, we have the Northern Virginia Mental Health Institute, which is located at Fairfax Hospital. And it has, unfortunately, not enough beds. And that's another issue in of itself, because we got a lot of people in there that are there ready for discharge, but there's no place in the community to put them. There are people in there that are there for not guilty by reason of insanity. And so they're just being housed there, and they're taking up bed slots. And so that's another issue that we need to deal with. But the third area, and this is really where we disagree, is Senator Deed strongly believes that we need to increase the amount of hours that you can hold an individual before finding a bed. And his bill has it from 24 hours. So as I stated, the current law is 4 hours, plus you can ask for additional 2 for a total of 6. Right. He wants to take it to 24. The House bill just builds on it, allows you to have another 2 hours on top of the 6
right,
for
so
a total of 8.
you get a total of 8.
Yes,
okay.
yes. And of course, there's some pushback that we've gotten for Senator Deed's bill. The sheriffs don't like it because the sheriffs have to hold the individual for the 24 hours. That takes time away from their deputies. We don't think that necessarily you need that long. There's been studies that have come out saying that 97% of the people that need to be placed to find a bed have a bed found within the allotted current 6 hours. So it's those other, that remaining 3%, those are the individuals that we need to make sure that they never fall through the cracks, that if they are deemed to be a danger to self or others, that we find a bed for them. And so the question really is it going to be 24 hours, as Senator Deeds would like to see, or is it going to be 8 hours, as what the House has passed? And I think that there's some civil rights issues in there. ACLU has some concerns about holding individuals for that long.
Now, do they go for the 8, or do they want something in between?
They support the 8. And of course, we'll come together and there'll be a conference committee and we'll decide what's the best place. Somewhere in the middle, there's a sweet spot between 24 hours and 8 hours.
Because what happens in this whole process, if somebody gets picked up on the street at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, by 6 or 7 in the morning, your 8 hours is gone.
Yeah.
And you're I mean, I sort of think of the nighttime, and I know it's not true for hospitals, but sort of as this dead zone of, if you need to find somebody a bed or you need to do the evaluation, are there really people able to do that then?
CSBs are open 24/7, and you're typically right, that's where people get picked up. Right. And they're usually picked up for misdemeanors. Failure to ID, trespassing, drunk in public, something like that. But they have a serious mental illness on top of that. And what we have in many facilities, and this is what I'm so grateful about seeing in the budget this year, is that we have what we call crisis intervention centers. So what the police can do when they pick someone up who they suspect for a misdemeanor, who has they believe is a serious mental illness, they can take them to a crisis intervention center to have them evaluated by the CSBs right away. And then they can drop that individual off and go back out on the street. And that's a much better place to put them than put them in a jail.
Right. So what do we'll see how that plays out, but I want to go to the second point. We've got about a minute and a half left. What should we be doing? You said this is the first step. What do you think ought to happen, assuming we get one of these through, we get the registry, we get some of these other things through, we figure out the hours. What do we need to do?
We need to take a comprehensive approach to our mental health system. We need to focus heavily on prevention. Let's prevent a crisis from ever occurring. And so let's make sure that we have more therapists, more access. When you and I get sick, we call the doctor and the doctor says we can see you in a week. Well, when you have a serious mental illness, you don't have a week. You need to see someone right away. Right. And I think that's the value that we're going to see with the Affordable Care Act. When the Affordable Care Act is going to cover people with mental illness, there's going to be mental health treatment in the Affordable Care Act. 80,000 people in Virginia will now get coverage that they didn't have before. So that's the first thing. That's going to be very helpful. Medicaid expansion is very much a part of that because a lot of people are low income, they're veterans, they need to get that access to therapists and psychiatrists when they need it right away. And the third part is the crisis intervention. PAC teams, we need to make sure when someone does go into crisis, we have the services there to get them through it.
Well, we are going to have to leave it there, but I thank you for coming in, and we will have you back to talk more about this and to talk about your candidacy.
Thank you.
But thank you so much
Delighted
for coming
to be here. Thank you so much.